Now, we're actually talking about how well the people can participate, and you say, well, they can actually bring in their input because they're going to go around the states or maybe geopolitical zones for them to participate in all of this. But another issue we also saw from the Asaba conference was the call for a single 5-year tenure for executives, elected officers. How does that amount to saving or deepening our democracy if we have to put that into our constitution?
Yeah, I recollect that a paper was presented on that point, that there should be a one-term presidency, so that this idea of a sitting president wanting to succeed himself and not concentrating on governance, planning for how he will come back towards the end of the first term could be removed, and also to ensure transparency in the electoral process. I think that is the whole idea.
Well, on the flip side, how do we explain the need for continuity? Because we do have some good leaders that have demonstrated credible leadership during their tenure.
Yes, that's true. Continuity in the sense that if you have a one-term president who all he does is he does his own and he leaves, okay? He does not plan ahead for somebody else coming in to take over from him, either from the same party or within the same caucus. I think the fear, essentially, for those who have advocated the single term is that if you look at the history of recent, the first term of the president is more or less not productive. After the first 2 years, the third year is used to prepare for his re-election.
Now, talking about...
if he spends half of the first term on preparing for re-election, you now find that essentially 2 years plus the 4 years equals 6 years. That is what the people have gained from his term. Why don't you then give him 5 years and let him concentrate? Because that means that 5 productive years.
So do you agree that it should be limited to one single term? Or
quite frankly, that wasn't my view.
You don't share that view at all, even with the ideas. Or sorry, Benga. No, considering the arguments that have been presented in favor of that, I mean, do you think that they're superior?
I think I still prefer the 2-term tenure, because it makes the president to be responsible to the people, knowing full well that he will have to go back to seek re-election. We concede that half of the first term is not usually very productive. You don't get optimal productivity from the city, not even at the presidential level, even at the state level. You find that towards the end of their first term, all they do is politicking.
Now, still on tenure elongation now, going back...
Sorry, I won't call it tenure elongation now.
Okay, tenure issue in the Constitution.
Yes.
Now, the governors are agitating for some particular clause to be sustained in the Constitution, and that's Section 308 of the 1999 Constitution that says no civic or criminal proceedings should be instituted against a sitting president, vice, governors, or deputy. And they are saying that this would be a distraction when they are facing criminal proceedings. How do you see this clause?
My personal view is that immunity should be retained in the Constitution. I'll tell you why. If you remove the immunity clause, you'll find that most of the governors will not be able to do anything. They will be faced with litany of litigations. You will find people filing private prosecution, what we call private prosecution. If they could not get their way through public prosecution, they will institute a private prosecution.
So are you saying they should go with impunity for a whole 5 years?
No. There is no limitation to the commencement of criminal proceedings against them. You've seen the examples. Governors who have been in office for 8 years, they are out of office and they are being prosecuted. They should be investigated if there's a crime. They should be investigated. When you have investigated, you document everything. And when he's out of office, you arrest and prosecute, which is what you have now. But what is important is to ensure that he is investigated and does not destroy evidence while in office.
So that's the importance of the immunity clause there. But I'm still trying to look at what Professor Elagu did propose on that day, even though some people would, maybe some have forgotten that it was in the Senate Review Committee that proposed the 5-year single tenure. But another Professor Onobanjo, he says he would rather have a 6-year term for the governors
right.
or executives, to take 1 year to settle down, 4 years to work, and another 1 year to pack out of office, because I think if you have to look at
this is the problem,
because if you look at your analysis or your observation of some who haven't even been productive in their second term in office, for Professor Onabanjo, he says, well, that will give them all the time to pack out, since they are almost using the same 4 years to do the packing out of the government house.
Quite frank, that if a man wants to be governor of a state, he should be prepared for it. It is just that with great respect to them, most governors don't have ideas before they came into office. It is when they get there that they begin to think of what they will do. Before election is, let me get there first. And that is the problem. If you go back to this 1979, the UPN had statistics on number of primary schools, what they will do, how they will cancel consumption of tea in offices, and they had all this data. Most of these political parties don't have all this information now.
So they should have.
They don't have research departments
before elections.
Before election, you should have all your information.
But isn't that where
that is what you should use to campaign for election, for you to be elected? But they campaign to get to office without having any program in mind. Let me get there first.
Isn't that where the single tenure comes in to help? In the sense that, now the responsibility will now lie more on the parties. If your candidate doesn't do well, say in the 5 years or the 6 years that he or she is there, what it means inevitably is that your party might not be elected a second time. Don't you think that it would also help to deepen democracy, especially at the party level?
I don't think so. The reason is this. If a governor is in office, if he's going to use the paraphernalia of his office to install a successor, whether it is 1 term, whether it is 2 terms, it is the same. It makes no difference.
But some people have said, if you ask some governors, they'll tell you that you should look at what has happened between governors and their successors. It's usually a fallout. Most times the successor oftentimes goes on his own tangent, leaving the person who helped install him.
That still wouldn't stop the governor from installing his successor, believing that he will cooperate.
Is this about the governor or the party?
Yes, you see, most of the parties don't have structures. I'm so sorry to say this. We all know what is on ground. Most of these political parties do not have structures. The management and operations of the parties begin and end with the governor now, in office.
You just
at the state level.
You just mentioned structure now, and that draws my mind to the proposal of a review of the federal structure, which calls for the recognition of the 4th tier of government, the traditional institutions, the traditional rulers, and also independence of the local governments from the state government.
My personal view is that the constitution has nothing to do with traditional institutions. I'm so sorry to say that, and I say that with great respect to all the traditional institutions in Nigeria. We are practicing the federalism. Let the states take care of traditional institutions. There may be states that say, look, we want to vote a particular percentage of our revenue for traditional institutions. Some states may say, no, in these states, let traditional institutions fend for themselves. Federalism connotes that we put together what binds all of us together so that we can develop at our own pace. Why should we have in a federal system provisions relating to traditional institutions? Those are what I would call state affairs, local issues. But some groups let the states deal with local issues.
Permit me. Some groups have called for sovereignty, like the Ohanese group, say, yes, but using the security situation in the country to buttress their stand for a sovereign group of Biafra. What do you make of that agitation?
Well, with respect, I will say that means collapsing Nigeria into different entities. Because once you have the sovereign state of Biafra, then what do you call the Southwest? Give it another name, then go to the north. That means that puts an end to what we have as Nigeria. I won't subscribe to that, actually. I still prefer that we have a very strong Nigeria, but with the federating units being able to develop at their pace. Now we are tied together to the detriment of each state. There is no state in Nigeria that does not have good people. There is no state in Nigeria that does not have bad people. What is important that each state should exploit its own resources to its maximum. But we are all looking up to the statutory grant called Federation Account in Abuja.
Yes,
Each state goes there to go and take its own share without developing itself.
Mr. Oyetibo, allow me here. I remember your colleague, Mr. Agbakuba, also said something about all of that, to the extent that the states, they have all the resources you talked about.
Yes.
But they are helpless. They cannot exploit them. They cannot explore them because of the laws in the Constitution. So the government, for instance, if I have bitumen in my own state, we cannot access it because of the laws presently that we operate.
Yes, it's still the same problem of fiscal federalism. Presently, all natural resources beneath the soil belong to the federal government, wherever they may be located. And because of that, the states don't think, in quote, of how to exploit most of these natural resources. Ondo State is well endowed with bitumen. Ondo State is well endowed with bitumen. But if you look at the present arrangement, the oil producing states are saying, look, give us more of these resources. If the states are to develop the natural resource and then contribute to the center, I'm sure everybody will want to beef up his own activities. If, for example, we say that whatever you produce in your state, give us maybe 40% to the center or 60% to the center, and you have a central body that can monitor what goes on in each state, I'm sure everybody will wake up.
And the cabs going to Abuja will stop.
You will no longer go to Abuja. You state and send to Abuja. You send to Abuja, you don't go to Abuja. Everybody now, that is why everybody is hammering for state creation. I want to go and take my own share. I want to go and take my own share.
How soon would you like to see this whole process concluded? The Constitution review.
Well, I don't know what this the National Assembly is doing on that. Presently, I know that the Senate committee intends to hold further conferences with a view to gathering information from the people and then producing their own version. But I know the House of Reps also will have to do it so, because at some point maybe the two committees will have to meet. I don't know what the arrangement is. But I would have loved to have all the views collated and everything put in place in the next 1 year, so that we could have time before the next election to have the final constitution that will be in place.